Okay, I think we're rolling. I'm going to try this the second time now. So, this video is going to be more MMA, boxing, K1 based. But if there are wrestling fans that want to comment, I would love it if you comment. In fact, I encourage you to comment, watch the video, hopefully you're entertained. I'm sorry if I don't sound my brightest or my best today. Feeling real drained. I've been sick. I really hope it's not norovirus, but that's another story altogether. You won't contract it via camera to camera, by the way, so don't before you go there. Anyways, this video is coming off the heels of a very recent event, or somewhat recent event, that took place in the world of boxing. And Manny Pacquiao fought Juan Manuel Marquez. And I've been a big fan of boxing, part of my childhood, my early childhood. Been a long time fan of it, and I watched Pacquiao and Marquez. I've seen all four of their fights. I've always felt that Pacquiao struggles against him, and if you told me that Pacquiao was going to lose to Marquez or struggle with Marquez, I wouldn't have been surprised. Now, if you're going to tell me that Marquez was going to knock him out, I would have been like, there's no way that's going to happen. But Marquez, Manny looks like he's winning. Marquez knocks him out. People are stunned. People are shocked. And then there was this mindset that came out after that fight happened that seems to be very existent within MMA and boxing in K1. It's not really a pro wrestling thing, because pro wrestling, it's an environment where the promoter determines who wins and who doesn't, and where the storyline goes. But give me a second. So there was this attitude after Pacquiao lost, and I've come across this attitude in MMA too, when Cain Velasquez fought, and if I can remember who it was, Junior Dos Santos the first time, and Junior knocked him out, and then this attitude kind of came out then. And when I've seen other guys lose in combat sports, this attitude somewhat exists. And it's this attitude that when a guy loses, he's a piece of shit, he's a nobody, he's worthless, he should be competing in the sport, he's washed up, he's done, he should retire. And every once in a while, there are occasions when that's true, that maybe it would be best for that person to physically retire. I've always felt that that applied to Ken Shamrock. As much as I respect him as an MMA fighter and as a pioneer of the sport of MMA, and feel that he should be respected and looked at as a pioneer and builder of the sport, I do think that physically now the sport has changed, and I don't think it's in his best interests to regularly be fighting and maybe do something else in the sport. I still think he has a lot to do in the sport, and I think that that sometimes applies to someone when, a guy should retire. I'm not saying that, he's worthless in addition to that too, but a guy that should retire. But then you get these people and they come out and they turn real nasty, and you get these guys and they're fans of a fighter, right? They're fans of a fighter, and then they lose a fight and then they're like, oh, well, I'm done with him now. I'm not a fan of him anymore. He's a piece of shit. Rubbish. And I noticed a lot of people saying that when Pacquiao lost to Marquez. Pacquiao's nothing. Pacquiao's a nobody. Oh, he's been beaten now. Yet they forget that he's been beaten before and he's come back. But they seem to really be coming out of the woodwork and writing him off and saying, oh, he's washed up and he's finished forever now. And I've seen it in other MMA instances. I've seen it with other fighters when a guy's lost and they write him off and say he's finished and washed up and, he's a piece of shit, he's a fucking nobody. And then they win one fight and then they're like, oh, he's back. And suddenly they're a fan of them again. And I think sometimes MMA fighters and boxers and K1 fighters, and I've heard them say this, I've heard John Jones say this at a fan convention in this country, that when you lose, fans lose interest in you, and he's saying that how they kind of are, and I'm kind of here to somewhat challenge that, because I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily take that mindset. I do think that mindset is a bit bad, and I think sometimes people can be a bit nasty when they when a guy loses, but there are fans that are very supportive of their favourite guys even when they've lost a fight. I mean, again, referencing him again, Bloodstained Lane, he's a huge fan of Shogun and Wanderlei Silva. And in 2011, it wasn't the best year for them. They lost some very big fights. Shogun lost to John Jones, Wanderlei got knocked out by Chris Lieben, and you didn't see him turn on them and go, oh, they're nothing now, they're worthless. As a fan, he took the loss, and it hurts when you see a guy lose. But he didn't write him off and say, oh, you know, fucking nobody, he should be finished. And I've seen that I've seen that so many times. And what I'm trying to say, and what I'm going to try and ask is, anyone out there that's an MMA fan, have you ever become a fan of a fighter more when they've lost fights as opposed to when they've won fights? Because winning is easy. It's easier said than done, having said that now, but winning is a lot easier than losing. Because when you win, everybody loves you. When you lose, it's a different story, and you kind of see where people really are at with you. And then you have to deal with the adversity of a loss and then bounce back. And to me, losses inspire me more than someone winning. And I'll tell you some occasions. When George St. Pierre was coming up, and I heard so much about him being this dynamic mixed martial artist and how great he was, and he admitted he is, I was never that sold on him. But when he lost to Matt Hughes the first time and then bounced back, I was more of a fan of his, because I felt that the loss made him more human, and we kind of got to know more about his psyche, and he was a lot more honest with himself. And then when he came back and bounced back, and I think that's a woman texting me, which isn't change, but when he bounced back and then he won the title and then fought Matt Serra and he lost to Matt Serra, there were a lot of people writing George off saying that he's finished and he's a nobody and I'll never come back from a loss like that ever again. And that loss actually made me a huge fan of George St. Pierre's, because again, you get to see this human side, this side of you, this side of that person that connects with you through the TV screen into here and into here. And that's what happened when George lost to Matt Serra, and I actually then at that point became a huge fan of his, and he'd been knocked out, and it's very odd saying that. I'll tell you another guy that applies to, Andrei Arlovski. I'll tell you right now, I was never ever that keen on Andrei Arlovski when he was in the UFC and when he was the UFC champion, and it was all about Andrei Arlovski and they were putting a lot into him. I was never that keen on him, and even towards the end when he was leaving and he had a 4-fight win streak, with one of those wins being in the UFC, and he fought in Affliction and he beat Ben Rothwell and he beat Roy Nelson and he was coming into the Fedor fight, I still wasn't that keen on him. I thought he was a good fighter, but then he lost to Fedor and he got knocked out by Fedor, and then he lost to Brett Rogers, and then he lost to Bigfoot Silva, I believe, and then he lost another fight after that. I think it was to Karatonov. I could be wrong, but he lost 4 fights in a row. And I'll tell you what, it was in that 4-fight loss streak that he was on, or losing streak that he was on, where I actually started to become a bigger fan of his. Because, again, there's something very human about losing. Fighting is a very, very interesting sport for a number of reasons. And the aspect of losing is quite real and quite gritty to me, more so than anything else, because it shows you the real person and how they're going to react now they've had this adversity thrown their way. And Andrei Arlovski, the way he kind of carried himself after those 4 losses, actually made me a bigger fan of his. And to wrap it up, one other person that I became a bigger fan of when he lost actually was Dan Hardy. And I'd known Dan Hardy for a couple of years when he fought for Cage Warriors and when he did some stuff with Cage Rage. And I always thought he was very charismatic and a good character to have in your weight class. And you can definitely find that he has his place in the sport, in the UFC. And I knew when he was going to fight George St. Pierre that he was going to... It wasn't the best matchup for him, I'll just say that. And he lost to George St. Pierre but showed a ton of heart. And then he lost to Carlos Condit and got knocked out. And I remember so many people coming out writing so many venomous things because he lost the fight, and calling him a piece of shit and calling him a fucking nobody and all of these things that they say. And then he lost to Anthony Johnson because he was out wrestled, and then he lost to Chris Lytle. And it was after the Chris Lytle loss where I actually, again, myself became a big fan of his. Because, again, he was very honest, very forthcoming, and very real with what he said. And I'll tell you what, when he said he was going to take that year out, I just wished the best for him. And I became a big, big fan of his. Because, and not to get too much into my personal life, but I related to his plight exactly, because I had a very similar 2009 and 2010 to him, and the second half of 2010 was not the best part, for me, and 2011, and I had to take some time off and figure out where I was going to go. And I found that that was very relatable and very admirable and very inspirational when Dan had lost to Chris Lytle and he worked out what he was going to do and what he was going to do with his life. And I tell you what, I kind of lived vicariously through him when he fought Duane Ludwig at the all heavyweight show in the undercard. And I'll tell you what, it was quite a thing. When he got the knock, when he hit Ludwig and he put his hands up and went, shit, I've got to finish him. I got really into that. And that was another example where I liked someone more when they lost, more so than when they were winning loads of fights and having everyone want to blow them and everything and buy them drinks. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to stop. This is an MMA topic. Again, I apologise if I don't sound too bright and cheery and chirpy. Feeling very drained with work and stuff to do, so not feeling too well. So I'm going to wrap it up. You let me know what you think. Once again, LV45, God bless you for your recommendation. I appreciate it so much. Everyone that's coming around that's subbing to my channel, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, you guys are just the best. I'm telling you right now, you guys have been wonderful to have around and to speak to, and I don't say it enough. But again, thank you. Mr. GTR, I know you're watching this, and you know that I told you that I was going to shout you out. Mr. GTR, hope you're keeping well. I'm sure we're going to speak in about 10-15 minutes. Ashes for real. Hello, by the way. And that's going to be me, and I'm going to head out. So take care, and see you soon.